Hey guys, today we're going to talk about tools, and there's quite a lot of them, so let's get started. Now the first tool we're going to talk about is your basic handsaw. Now these little guys are available at most gardening stores worldwide. Now what we use these for primarily is when we're collecting trees in nature, but you can also use them for particularly hard root packs. They do a really good job at that. Now these guys are your basic bamboo chopsticks. As you can see, they're very large, way bigger than the ones you get at your typical Chinese restaurant, but they're used for basically the same thing as bonsai. We use them to remove soil from the roots and to add soil to the roots when transplanting. If you want more information, I suggest watching our How to Repot a Bonsai video. Your basic set of shears, also known as scissors, clippers, or snippers, these always have regional terms, come in a variety of sizes and shapes, but they're all basically the same structure. You can see the larger ones are used for cutting larger diameter branches. They're also snubby because you don't need to have such a long blade to do that kind of work. On the other end of the spectrum, you have what are called leaf pruners. Now these guys are never very sharp, they're more of a pinching tool. They're used for severing small twig-like branches and leaf pruning. Now, these are your three different kinds of wire cutter. Now the size of your wire cutter depends on the size of the wire you're cutting. The larger wire cutter is for large diameter wire, and the smaller ones are for smaller diameters. Most people tend to pick a wire cutter and stick with it. Now here you have gin tools. This one here is called a gin plier, and it's used for removing bark from a branch. These guys right here are gin knives. They're used to remove gin from the bark in a slicing-like fashion. Now here we have three different kinds of branch cutter. This one here is the largest variety of side cutter. As you can see, it has more of a straight edge than a concave side. Here you have a deeper, meaning more concave edge cutter. This one is used to cut deeper into the branch. This one over here is actually a reappropriated tool used for removing horseshoes. We use it for cutting large branches and truly huge roots. Over here you have the many different kinds of tweezers. Each of these has a highly specialized individualized function, but they all do basically the same thing. They're used to remove leaves from the tree and to help clean up debris from the top layer of bonsai soil. Over here you have what is basically just a gardening shear. Now these are actually very helpful to bonsai because they can be used to break off dead branches. You always find a way to use these where you can't use other tools. They're a lot less delicate, so they can do tougher work. Now these serial killer looking tools over here are what is affectionately called a root ripper if you're using them poorly, or a root claw if you're doing it properly. For more information on those, I highly recommend looking at our How to Repot Bonsai video. Basically what they're used for is removing soil from the root mass when transplanting. So these are all the basic tools that a beginner should have, but before we talk about those, I want to talk just for a moment about buying tools. So if you look online, you're going to find sets of tools that are either very expensive, we're talking $200 to $250, or very inexpensive sets, which are going to be $30 to $45. Now, the problem with the cheaper sets is they are manufactured in China usually. A lot of times they are stainless steel, the same metal that you make a butter knife out of, or a show sword. And anyone who's used either will know that they bend and break pretty easily. The more expensive sets are usually made from carbon steel. They've been hardened. They last a very long time, up to 30 to 60 years sometimes. Some of the tools I have are 35 years old and are in working condition, and they look great. Now, whichever way you go, you have to understand that there's going to be a little bit of give and take. The higher the price for an individual tool, typically the better quality it is. The lower the price, the more often you have to buy it. Now, there are alternatives to this. If you buy some tools that aren't necessarily for bonsai, for instance, some of the tools you'll see here, there's American counterparts to. This tool is your basic wire cutter. Now, this one is actually manufactured in the USA. It is used by electricians and even plumbers. This tool if you bought the Japanese equivalent of it, would be about $45. Now, US retail, I bought this for $15. Now, for those of you who are going to and have watched our repotting video, you'll know that when you use chopsticks, you don't necessarily have to use them. I should say they don't have to be chopsticks. Pencils, pieces of stick, things like that, they do very well. These are very inexpensive. We get most of ours by using old pencils or by getting chopsticks at Chinese restaurants. This tool, the shears or snips as they're often called, has an American variety. It's available at most garden stores. It's actually sold as a quote bonsai tool. Now you'll see it in different manifestations depending on where you live in the US or in the world. The two tools that you have to get that are strictly Japanese are the jin tool, also known as jin pliers, which is a very specialized tool and has to be the bonsai variety, and the concave or branch cutter, which again is very specialized and has to be the Japanese variety. Now besides those two tools, the rest can be kind of mismatched. You will start out with these tools and then slowly build your inventory as you progress through bonsai. You'll find special tools for special things. You'll use some tools in unique ways. For instance, I find myself using an axe a lot, but then again, that's usually collecting fairly large trees. And as you progress through bonsai, you'll find that you become more comfortable with all of these tools. So now that we understand which tools we need, we can start cleaning them. Now for light cleaning, which believe it or not, this is still considered light cleaning, you're just going to use sand flex. Now on tools you can use fine, medium, or coarse depending on how dirty it is. Tools are not going to get very scratched up like pots will. Now for harsher cleaning you might have to soak these in CLR, and what you need to do at that point is soak them for about 20 minutes, clean them off, scrub them down, and then continuing with the oiling process. Now, when you have a straight edge tool like this, you want to make sure to clean the inside. Sandflex is kind of amazing because it just scrubs it right off. It's almost like magic. Now that's the first time. Go over it again, it becomes even cleaner. Now you want to make sure that you clean as far into the groove as possible. This might mean you have to alter it, so you can see like right there where you missed a spot, we can clean that. Continue to move that up. We have a spot there that we missed. Now, these tools have been exposed to a little bit of water to rust them, to give you an understanding of how quickly these tools can be injured if they're not properly cleaned and oiled. Now, there's a sealant that the tools come with. It's oil based and it turns the tools a little bit black. You want to make sure when you clean them that you're cleaning off any debris, but that you're not scrubbing off that protective coating. Because once the protective coating is gone, it's going to become a lot dirtier a lot quicker. Now, you also notice that where your tool pivots often becomes dirty. You have to scrub that too. You want to make sure you get the back of it, the inner gap, which we already talked about, and any part that is dirty. Now, I've shown you how to do a straight edge one. You basically just hold it firmly and rub it down. When you work on a curved tool, the method is basically the same for the outside. When it comes to the inside, you have to get a smaller one and be very careful how you clean it. It's very easy to cut yourself on the inner curve of a concave cutter or any other curved tool. It also becomes harder to get the gap on these tools because unlike the gap on a straight edge, there's always a protective gap. Now, eventually, as you wear down your sandflex, you can cut it into different shapes. This one is a wedge, which is perfect for getting into that little spot. I won't make you watch the entire cleaning process, so we'll skip ahead a minute or so. Now that we have our tools nice and clean, and you can see they've gotten a lot cleaner, we can start to sharpen them. Now, typically what most bonsai artists use is some kind of titanium sharpening tool like this. This one is pretty common, it's inexpensive, and you find it online a lot. When you sharpen a straight blade, you hold the sharpening tool at the same angle as the blade, trying to match it as best as possible. Start at the tip and then pull your way down. Now you want to do this slowly and carefully. The up and down movement that most people want to do will damage the blade or at least create scratch marks. Now, typically, it only takes about 4 or 5 movements to sharpen the blade. Now, you'll also turn it over, and keeping it perfectly flat once, pull it down the blade. Now what that does is it helps get any kinds of nicks or burls that are on the other side. You never want to sharpen the inner layer of a blade, so you don't ever do this. You just bring it down, get it that way, turn it over, do the other side, make sure there's nothing there, sharpen the other side, and it's good. Now, when you have a concave edge, it becomes a little bit more tricky. You have to make sure that you mimic the outer edge and inner edge perfectly. So usually we start on the outer edge, start on the intersection of it, because this side is this side of this tool. Now once you get that edge right, and again it should only take 3 or 4, because you want to sharpen and clean your tools often so that you're doing only a little bit of work, not a lot of work. You do the same thing you did on the other side, you match the angle, and you just get rid of any burls. Do the other side, which can be equally tricky. And that's basic sharpening. Now that our tools are properly cleaned and sharpened, we can oil them. Now, depending on what oil you use, and there's quite a variety of them online, the application process can be a little different. Most oils are going to have you apply it to both the bladed area and the entire tool itself. This will help create a protective layer that keeps out rust and any other type of gunk that you might get on your tool. You rub the whole thing down, apply oil a bit generously. Also apply tool oil directly to the blade joint. Wiggle it a little bit to help the oil get inside. You'll also notice if your tool is a bit rusty that you have a little bit of rust coming out, and that's perfectly normal. You can even work the tool a bit to get the extra rust out of there. After you've wiped the whole thing down, you let it sit for a little while, let the oil soak in, and in about 5 to 10 minutes you come back and well, we'll see you in 5 to 10 minutes.
One eternity later.
Now that we've let the oil soak in for about 5 to 10 minutes, we can start cleaning it off. And you'll notice a lot of it is already soaked into the blade, and a lot of it's already soaked into the handle. Now, you're going to want to remove all the excess. You'll never get all of it, but having a little extra oil on it isn't going to do anything bad, especially if you're using the correct type of oil. You want to make sure that you oil your tools every 4 months. The reason you do this is to make sure they stay lubricated and protected. Now, in the winter, you might be lubricating them and oiling them every 2 months, depending on the weather. We have some pretty mild climate here in California, but if you live in Montana or anywhere that gets a lot of rain, you're going to be cleaning them a lot more often. Now, you do want to be cleaning and sharpening your tools once every 2 weeks, depending on how often you use your tools. The best thing to do is to clean them and sharpen them before every use, which for some people can be every once in a while. For others, it is almost every day, like here at the nursery. Now, when you store your tools, you want to make sure that they are in a dry area, preferably inside, where they're not going to be interacting with moisture, wind, or any kind of weather. Now, what we're going to do is demonstrate tool use, but we're going to have to go cut a branch to do it. Okay, so we're just going to demonstrate some proper use of basic tools. As we mentioned earlier in the video, there's really only the straight edge and the curved blade. This tool right here is a gin knife, which we'll get to later. But the basic way you use a straight edge tool is you want to make sure that your cut point is closer to the base. This is what we call the pivot point. If it's out here, it's not going to damage the blade, but it might nick it. If it's down to here, you could break the tip off, and you're going to be putting a lot more force when you don't need to. So the basic way you do that is you put it close to your pivot point and you cut. You notice that it was a pretty easy cut. Also, if you look closely at the wound, it's very straight and it is very even. This will increase healing, it'll promote growth, and it is harder for an infection to take place. When you use your concave cutter, the same basic principle applies. Where you want the branch to be is right here in the middle. If it's closer to the tip, it breaks. If it's closer over here, it can break. Now, when you make this cut, you're very close to the base. You press it firmly. You grasp in the middle or the back of it, depending on how much force you're going to need to put in, and you go like that. Again, you can see it's a nice, good, concave looking cut, which promotes healing and is harder for an infection. You'll also notice that the branch shot off. The bigger the branch is, the higher velocity it seems to travel at. So you want to make sure that you're not cutting directly at your face or at the face of someone that you care about. It's a good way to get rid of your enemies if you need to. Now, the last blade is your basic, essentially it is really just a razor blade with a handle. You want to make sure that when you're removing bark, you press it firmly and cut it off in slivers. You can see that I went right past the bark, right past the cambium, right there into the sapwood. It's at this point that you could use another tool, or if you need to continue carving, you could do so. Now, you'll notice that my thumb is pressed up against right where the branch is coming into contact with the blade. That makes sure that I don't slip like that, that it's not pushing off to the side, that I don't dig in, that I don't just jut off like that. You're actually holding it with two hands. You can continue going as deeply as you want. We'll do more demonstrations on more tools as we go along. I highly recommend looking at the wiring video to get an understanding of all tools related to wiring. All right, talk to you guys next time. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video, find us on Facebook. You'll find links to everything in the description below. If you have ideas for future videos or have questions, put them in the comments section. And if you feel like it, visit our online store. We've got trees, pots, t-shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. All right, I'll see you next time.